We need to realize that the Earth is the first space community. Here we are. We tend to dichotomize Earth and space, and I think it's a big mistake. And I think you've seen that, and that's the sort of the business plan in a way.
And you know, I mean, Frank, it's such a good point you make. I mean, I believe this generation now has possibly, from certain aspects, I mean, every generation holds its own, but from certain aspects, we have the greatest responsibility in the entire history of human civilization, and possibly for the future of human civilization. And that responsibility is this, that the very nature of how we flourish and expand off our one embryonic planet, the culture, the practices, the best practices, and the intent that we move out into the solar system with may have lasting effects for generations and millennia on the nature of human growth into the galaxy. And it's, you know, we look around the world today and always and see how hard it is to rise to our better angels. You know, we're a complex species driven from a DNA imperative for survival and resource gathering and risk reduction. And yet our hearts and minds build communities and reach out and reinforce our social fabric. But we have the protective envelope and cocoon of our atmosphere, our gravity, where we can play up and act a little more ridiculously, and the consequences are localized.
Yeah.
In space, when we don't have that protective envelope of our beautiful Earth with the atmosphere and the lands, even the smallest discord that transpires into physical interaction can become a weapon of mass destruction.
Yeah.
A single firearm discharge in a space station could cause extraordinary and widespread loss of life.
Right. Yeah.
So we have greater responsibilities to be better consistently than we are here.
Absolutely.
In order to move into space, we go through a pinch point of cultural inversion and have to build new rules that allow for longevity and sustenance of flourishing in the most vulnerable of environments, both psychologically and physically.
Yeah.
You know, the further we move away from our beautiful home, the greater the challenges, especially multi-generational, that will emerge of identity, of culture, of belonging, of a sense of who we are. And by establishing principles, the highest ideals and principles of our humanity, and as much as we can without being creating doctrination, but as much as we can establish a set of ideals of the best of our nature, even though we may not be able to ever reach them, we always know the North Star to which we need to aspire.
Right.
And I think that will be important to establish this generation.
Very well said. And on the practical side of that, you mentioned how unforgiving the environment is. You know, I actually discovered your thinking in a YouTube video. And in that video, you talked about how it really doesn't make sense to send humans out first to the moon and Mars to build the infrastructure, that it should really be autonomous robots, intelligent systems who could prepare the way for the humans. I'm wondering, do you still think that, and could you talk about it a little bit?
Absolutely. No, thanks for raising that reference, Frank. Very much appreciated. If we take a look out the window at our cities and our infrastructure and our communities, we see an end-to-end value chain and supply chain of commodities, food, transportation, infrastructure, security, power, water. You need that whole chain. You need the whole system for humans to be able to start operating comfortably, where you can dismiss some of the lower hierarchy of needs as commoditized process, so that creativity and value creation can then be the focus of operations. In space, I don't believe the last 75 years of the exploration paradigm is what we must follow for the next century or so of expeditionary paradigm. And let me explain that. For better or for worse, I believe the free market is the truest representation of our ability to transact value. as a species. We need to create infrastructure and systems that allow us as rapidly as possible to enable market forces to take root and for the generation of economic value to be realized. So in order for that to happen, you need a significant number of people, and a significant number of infrastructure in place. The only way that we can really mandate human-based exploration is through national agency-based programs. That's so far, and it doesn't look like that's going to change in the decades coming soon. I say that with slight humility, because we never know, the tremendous efforts of SpaceX and the enormous efforts that I know Blue Origin are making, and others are certainly pushing that envelope. But the reality is that we need to be able to send dozens to hundreds of people to a location to create critical mass of transactional capability and economy. In order to do that at pace, if we take the human astronaut approach and the human operator astronaut approach with the necessary machine tools, we are looking at a surface-based establishment on the moon, because you'll basically have surface pods and station components to create a surface base, maybe covering it with regolith for security, radiation and micrometeorite security. But for the most part, it will be a base mentality. Where I see the real liberation of growth occurring is if we send robots out first. Let's talk about the moon. And with minimal additional hardware or accessories or consumables, we have our robots, which we have our robots doing now terrestrially, to be able to excavate underground, under the lunar surface. Once you can commoditize the ability to create caverns, tunnels, atriums, you can build cities. And you can continuously do that and have multiple species of robots then undertaking the subsequent layers of refinement. So you have the first robots as excavators and haulers. Then you will have robots that undertake finishing and shotcreting or lunarcreting. You may have robots that can establish conduits and piping. And so you get all the base underground infrastructure, even to the point of establishing airlocks, air, water supply, and basic food material. So what I want to see, and what we must do, is OffWorld is building its robotic capability for its in-space solar system toolkit to the point where we can build infrastructure on the lunar surface and in free space, both in compressive gravity and tensile microgravity build environments, so that the astronaut can open the airlock, close it, walk inside the new habitat, take off her helmet, breathe the air, drink a glass of water, and then get down to work on taking it to the next level. Mm-hmm. And there are a number of constraints as to what is possible and when. And I'll just go quickly through a few technical constraints. Machine vision and interpretation with small data, as opposed to large data image classification, is a critical area of research that needs to continue. And there's lots happening. Meta just came out with a new segmentation tool just a day or two ago, which is an extraordinary value add. So all these technologies are emerging rapidly. The ability to increase the performance density of processors and machine intelligence. The establishment of the correct infrastructure of swarming species of robots heterogeneously collaborating, built on a modular architecture. OffWorld can check this one. And then dexterity, robotic dexterity. Bringing that together so that the tooling, whether it's additive, construction, manufacturing, fabrication, or subtractive, excavating, digging, crushing, beneficiation, whatever's required, the dexterity of the tooling is at the right level. So, for example, fine manipulation of, let's say, for medical robotics or some other intricate work may or may not be available today, but in 10 years it has an increasing likelihood to be robustly available. But whatever that level of dexterity is, the human astronaut or operator or resident can then take that next level onwards. Being slightly flippant, whether it's putting curtains up on the skylights or whatever, or making it their own, or the creative aspects, the human factors for continued living, it will be super critical. And so we absolutely are pushing to have our robots being completely capable. And OffWorld is the only company really that is operating commercially, terrestrially, undertaking the analog industrial sector activities on Earth, building revenue, refining and improving our products as we get ready to mobilize them for in-space utilization.